The Antonio Pierce, Tom Telesco era of Raiders football is upon us. How are things set up for year one? We're examining the state of the Raiders roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
Raiders.
Raiders.
It's time. Talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Spoiler alert, we are recording on Monday.
Yeah.
So we don't know who won the cup last night. There may or may not be friendly banter around the cup. I know what we are rooting for it to happen. We don't know who won the cup. We don't know because it's
Panthers.
It's late Panthers on Monday.
We'll see how it ages, but I said go Panthers.
Okay.
Joe Marino, see Sam Ryder hoisting
the cup.
See it.
Okay, we'll find out.
Rats, everybody throws the rats on the field. What is that about?
Ice?
Yeah, the ice.
So it was something to do with one of the players bonked and KO'd a rat in the locker room their first season.
Okay.
And then went out and had a hat trick or something like that that night.
Yeah.
And it became the legend of he hunted the rats, right? Because cats hunt the rats.
I just respect that they're put toy rats on the ice. You got Nashville throwing actual catfish. We have
I think we can all appreciate nobody smuggling in rodents and chucking them on the ice for.
It might be the least disgusting thing, a catfish or a octopus. I don't know. What's the most disgusting thing out of those three?
That gets thrown on the ice, or out of those three options?
Oh, that gets thrown on the ice.
I mean, I like.
Which would you least like to have on your pocket?
I don't think you could get a Ziploc bag for the slimy stuff. You would think that you don't have to. It doesn't have to be gross. Although I don't know, what do they do? They check your pockets. Do they do the brush down thing when
no
you
metal?
Go in?
No metal.
I don't know. It's just
good.
A weird. A lot of iron though, right? In that thing, what's mercury? A lot of mercury in your seafood. So maybe that they could check the mercury detectors at the arenas. Let's get into the Raiders.
Yeah, let's please do. Yes,
and get off of whatever diatribe that we just circled the drain on there. And the Raiders are a team that's a really interesting one for us in this process because they're a team that kind of feels like they're starting to stack some talent. They had an opportunity this offseason to make a head coaching decision. They stuck with an interim head coach. They bring in new football brain trust with football operations to go along with that. Some additions that I think are in position to be high impact players for them. Be interested to see how they turn out, but we're basing everything that we do now off of what we know about these players. So we are watching all the players for all the teams and then putting all the teams on all the players for all the teams into buckets to kind of quantify where they are at this juncture of their career, whether they're cornerstones, quality starters, adequate starters, quality depth, replacement level starters, incomplete evaluations, rookies, non-roster caliber players, or practice squad caliber players. And there's numerical points that are associated with that. We put them all into buckets. At the end of the rainbow, we get all of our roster power rankings, and then we put it through a coaching lens, and that gives us our full team power rankings for the 2024 season. So this is our 7th division. And Joe, I don't know what you just did to your camera. Tell us what happened. You're pushing buttons over there.
So a little bit of technical difficulties there, Kyle Crabbs. My apologies, but I am excited to talk about the Raiders and in particular this offense I'll be honest with you. This is probably the team that my perception of them changed the most from my general thoughts going into the study and then coming out of the study. Like I was like, wow, I think there's a little bit more here to be excited about than I originally anticipated. Now, of course, I have concerns about the quarterback position. But this team was what?
Pro Bowler Gardner
right.
Minshew. You love to remind everybody.
Right. Pro Bowler Gardner Minshew. But this team was at 8-9 last year with Aidan O'Connell as a rookie, Jimmy G, horrible to start the year. Like, this is probably better, like, just because you did bring in Minshew, who I think is a quality backup quarterback, and Aidan O'Connell does have some experience. So I think you have a legit battle here to see who the starter is, but there's some decent things around them. Now, there's some young players. I think a lot is going to depend on how good Zamir White, who got a chance to play later in the season last year and had like 4 100-yard games from scrimmage, 200-yard rushing games, looked good, but very small sample size throughout his first couple seasons in the NFL. How good can Tre Tucker be as a complementary piece of this passing game in the slot? What are we going to get out of these tight ends? Brock Bowers is a rookie. Think highly of him, but he's a rookie. Is Michael Mayer going to be more of a factor in year 2 with the presence of Brock Bowers? But I do love Davante Adams, of course. I think Jakobi Meyers is a good player. But these other weapons and how they fill in along with the quarterback play stands out to me a lot with this Raiders team. But it feels a little bit more potent than I thought maybe it would be going into the study.
Yeah, I think you look at 12 personnel. I think you look at some of the speed options with the complementary receivers. You have a size player in Zamir White. You do have an offensive line in front of it. At what point do we put Gardner Minshew as the official heir of Ryan Fitzpatrick?
He's on that path, all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if Ryan Fitzpatrick didn't go to Harvard and grew up in like the backwoods of Alabama, and instead of like being a genius, he like knew how to be like a high Riz player.
Yeah.
Do you know what Riz is?
No, I didn't. I was hoping you wouldn't ask, but you had to. Like,
it's like Urban Dictionary slang, like charisma, like Riz. It's typically associated with like flirting with somebody. You hit him with the Riz. It's like, oh, like that worked. Like you're very charming. And Gardner knows how to do that for sure.
Yes. Okay, so
my point being, Gardner Minshew, you know what the limitations are. You know what the strengths are. Kind of there's a chaos merchant-y element of Gardner Minshew with how he can extend plays. He can create big plays because he's never seen a throw he doesn't think he can make. And sometimes he's right and sometimes he's wrong. And that's just the parallels to peak Fitz, where like he comes in with a team and it's like, okay, he's maybe going to compete with somebody. Oh, he's going to win the job. Oh, hey, things are going pretty good. And then, oh, the limitations manifest themselves and there's a glass ceiling. Let's aspire to be something better again. And then he goes somewhere else and the same exact thing happens. Like, I think that can work for Las Vegas this year to some degree, because I feel a lot better about their offensive line than we did last year. Like, Andre James has turned into a very reliable player for them, and it was a big win for them to get him under lock and key before free agency started. I happen to know at least one team would have been very interested in signing Andre James in free agency. But it was like the day before free agency started, like he came off the market. It was like that week he agreed to his extension. I have Dylan Parham. Jackson Powers Johnson is a second-round pick. That stands out to me is the big boyness of kind of what they have up front, right? Like they got some big bodies. They got some maulers. And then to have Zamir White running behind that with a quarterback who can extend plays, and you have an Alf to feed the ball to, but then you go 12 personnel and stay heavy with teams. I agree with you. I think there's some really interesting stuff going on with Las Vegas. I think my biggest question is, can Luke Getsy put it all together for him?
That's a fair question. I want to get a little bit more into this offensive line because I think it's pretty fascinating. Some of the dynamics at tackle, some of their depth additions as well. So we will get into that on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us.
Stick with us. Not just Joe. Stick with us.
Push the button. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. but FanDuel lets me keep the goods, the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. How about these Raiders bets that they have for you right now? You can get Maxx Crosby to record 15 or more sacks during the regular season at plus 250.
That's risky.
They have plus 180 to sweep the Broncos. You think the Raiders take 2 against Denver? You can get that at plus 180. Here's the one I like. This is the one I like. I'm smashing the over here. They have the Raiders wins at 6.5. You can get the over at plus 104. Smash the over on that. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Hey, Joe, way to hit him with the Riz on the ad read there.
Yeah,
did a nice
Riz.
job.
Yeah, Riz them up there. So more on this offensive line, because my perception of this group was like, okay, you lost Jermaine Illuminor and Greg Van Roten, who are older players, but they were at least stable players on the right side. And it's like, all right, what are we going to do here? And then I'm like, I watched a little Thayer Munford.
He got something. There's something there,
right? And I remember, like, don't you remember at Ohio State where we were both like, yeah, I think he's okay. And then he got drafted late, and he's kind of been a backup. Got a chance to play some left tackle actually last year, but I think he's a reasonable option, like to find out at right tackle. And of course, they drafted DJ Glaze in the 3rd round. But I thought throughout this entire deal, right, where you're going to have probably JPJ as a starter, you're probably going to have Thayer Munford as a starter. Having hedges like in the depth in the form of an Andres Pete and a Cody Whitehair, like you don't love those guys as your starters, but those guys off the bench, like those are really good depth players for this Raiders offensive line, given their current dynamics.
Oh, and they clearly thought highly of DJ Glaze to spend a 3rd round pick on him. Yeah. So I think you can look at the 1 through 8 that the Raiders have collected from a talent perspective. And that's a group of 8 on the offensive line that they should feel very, very good about. We grade 7 offensive linemen for what we do. And Jackson Powers Johnson and how quickly he can acclimate and play guard after what is this journey that was defensive tackle, and then it was guard, and then he moved to center, and he couldn't snap the ball. Nobody talked about it. Now he's going to be playing guard again, so you feel really good about that. Parham in year 3.
I like Parham.
Yeah, so Kolton Miller staying healthy is one thing, but Jackson Powers Johnson is a rookie, and then Parham in year 3. I think that's like there's a lot of ceiling to grow into for this offensive line, but like you just outlined, like the 1 through 8 on the offensive line is one of the deeper 1 through 8s that we have. As far as like, if these guys got to play, you're like, okay, like we can make it work. There's guys that have tomato. Your brother tweeted not that long ago and talked about the no tomato can theory for offensive linemen, right? Just don't have a tomato can. There's a bunch of teams that we've done that like O-line 7 and 8 are tomato cans. The Raiders don't have that. That's a great place to be.
Team we did yesterday
has.
We don't know. There's no label on those cans.
They're swing tackles, a tomato can, unless Suamate really catches. Yeah,
we'll see. How does this team maximize Bowers and Mayer? Isn't that kind of like an interesting layer? They high first round pick in Bowers after picking Mayer 36 in a deep tight end class. Like you mentioned it already, 12 personnel is certainly a big part of what this team wants to be. I think they have very complementary skill players. Like, honestly, it's just a matter of it coming together. And Luke Getsy, kind of a curious hire to be the offensive coordinator. Like, I think there's a lot here, but figuring out these skill sets, how to make it work, what you want to be schematically, I think is the big thing here, because I think you have enough talent to be a pretty good offense.
I would agree. I think the biggest roadblock for them is going to be Getsy making some leaps with his play design versus what it was in Chicago.
Yeah.
And if he does that, this is, I think the running back position aside, where you just have some unproven talent with Zamir White, I think the pass catching weapons is better than anything that Luke Getsy had in Chicago. Is that fair to say?
Right. I mean, yeah, I think that's fair.
It was like Cole Kmet and DJ Moore and
that's it. Darnell Mooney
no longer being a good player, because there were other better players around him that became more featured players, and it didn't click anymore.
Even some of these depth players are like Jalen Guyton. There's a speed dynamic that with Jalen Guyton that I really love. He hasn't been healthy the last 2 years, but the 2 years before that, he was like a really nice like ancillary piece for the Chargers. And Michael Gallup, I know that the best Michael Gallup's behind you, but if that's like your fourth receiver,
he's the backup. If he's the backup to Jakobi Meyers,
you're fine.
Right. So you got Guyton as the backup to Tucker as a guy who can run, and then you got Gallup as the backup to Myers as a fairly sized good route runner.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like a lot of what they have cooking here. It's what's the ceiling for Gardner Minshew, and how can Luke Getsy sew it all together?
You think he starts? You think it's Minshew's team?
I do. I know O'Connell had some looks. I just don't think there's a lot of appeal there. You can obviously push the ball down the field, but if you want to be a vertical passing game, I think Aidan O'Connell made a lot of sense for what, in theory, Josh McDaniels was going to be going for. If Josh McDaniels had any job security, if he was any good at doing his job.
Well, what about the transition away from Josh Jacobs? Because I think you watched the Raiders last year, especially under Antonio Pierce, and they ran the ball, then they ran the ball, then they ran it some more, and they had some efficiency in the passing game. But like that was clearly their identity, and they knew their formula. Well, we let Josh Jacobs walk. Zamir White's been waiting in the wings, obviously a big recruit, but not a ton of production to show, like either at Georgia or, of course, in the NFL. Again, that sample size at the end of the season last year is very exciting. And as a dynasty owner of Zamir White that's had him on my taxi squad for a few years, I'm quite excited about Zamir White. But like Alexander Madison's not a great like backup. Like there's a lot in Zamir White to be a thing here for this offense, because you know that like for what they could be with some of these weapons throwing the ball, I think at their core they're going to want to run the football.
Mm-hmm.
But like, and Josh Jacobs isn't here, and that's been a core piece of who they've been offensively.
Don't sleep on Dylan Laub.
Oh, see, I knew I could pull something out of you.
Yeah, you're gonna tease me there. 6th round pick, size, can run, smaller school kid. He should be higher on the big board than Alexander Madison.
Ooh, you think wow, you think he's got that type of opportunity?
I don't know how big the opportunity is going to be, but it's just I know what my appetite is for Alexander Madison, and I know where Amir Abdullah's at in his career right now.
Right, kick return.
And the Raiders kind of did this with Josh Jacobs versus Zamir White, right? It's like we'll go with the big guy that's fresh and young and can run with some power. And I think Laub can bring some of that to the Raiders backfield as well, provided he gets an opportunity to make the team.
All right, it's been all offense to this point. On the other side of it, let's get into the defensive side of the football. Some big additions at the defensive line. We'll talk all about that here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with us.
Wilkins got the bag. Top 5 paid defensive player in football, Christian Wilkins.
I feel like you're the one qualified to comment on that.
Well, you're uniquely qualified. You've had a lot of Christian Wilkins experiences as well.
Right, sure have.
Good player, great player. Very well-rounded player. Finally got to see a version that wasn't in the gap control style scheme where he did a lot of dirty work his first few years. And I think the book on Christian Wilkins as a pass rusher got a little unfairly painted based off of what he was in the Brian Flores / Josh Boyer iterations of the team. You saw in the Vic Fangio scheme last year, 9 sacks, obviously a big jump in production in that regard.
And pressures, right? Like the pressure story was really, I think what was his career high previously, like 30 pressures?
Well, and I think that's part of where that is, if Christian has anywhere to tap into now, I think it's his finishing ability on those pressures and flattening and tight angles to get to the quarterback. And he's so gracefully fluid to cross somebody's face or crash at the snap. And then he gets like hip to hip with you. And if he can figure out how to tighten that turn, he's going to add another 3-4 sacks to his annual totals. And I think that's obviously some of what the Raiders are banking on, but you're putting him into a defensive line that has Maxx Crosby and Malcolm Koonce and Tyree Wilson. I think that core of players, you get really excited about what it can look like rushing the passer, because Christian, he played on a team last year that had some good pressure players. Jalen Phillips wasn't the best version of himself and then got hurt. And Bradley Chubb played sublime football, but he's not Maxx Crosby. He's a totally different build and body type. If Tyree Wilson is, I think, a more explosive player that can play next to you than anyone ever has. So the focus for me for the Raiders, because a lot of this depth chart is guys that were back from last year's team that stabilized once they made the coaching staff change, is how do you maximize this contract for Christian Wilkins? How do you get the best version of Christian to justify the dollars? And I think there's some nice pieces between an explosive twitched up guy and Koonce who can play outside. Wilson can reduce inside on passing downs. And then you got Crosby. And I think that's the pathway for them. That's going to be their best 5 guys or best 4 guys rushing the passer when they're rushing 4.
I agree with that. I think to answer your question of how did you maximize this contract for Christian Wilkins, I think next year we got to get a quarterback, right? We can get to that, but like I think this is the team that I look at and say, get a quarterback because you're pretty good, right? And I think that's something they're going to need to do, but also he needs a running mate, right? A defensive tackle. John Jenkins, Adam Butler, Byron Young. I mean, we'll see on Byron Young. He's obviously very young, but I would want to have somebody next to him that they can play off of one another. I think that's a underrated component of defensive tackles. Like he played off of Zach Sealer. Like that's a very good couple of guys to play off of. And I think he needs to kind of have that player in Vegas. But I just want to spend a second here talking about Maxx Crosby, who, dude.
What else can you say about Maxx Crosby at this point?
Well, the Raiders have 2 players that are tier within the tier. Like, so we have your franchise cornerstone players, and then we have like a special bucket for like the best of the best.
Best of the best.
You got Davante Adams and Maxx Crosby, who are both part of that club. And I don't know, like you like football, you like watching Maxx Crosby. I mean, the unrelenting effort, the repertoire of moves, the growth that he's had physically and personally, it's unbelievable, right? It's absolutely unbelievable. And I think if you extend that question back to Maxx Crosby, how do we maximize Maxx Crosby? You get him a Christian Wilkins. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to Chris Long, and he was talking about, he was asked the question, actually, would you rather rush next to a great interior defensive lineman or opposite of a great edge rusher? He's like, I want to rush next to the great defensive tackle all day long. Like, it's like, that's great that I have somebody opposite of me, but I want somebody next to me. Right. And I think can Maxx Crosby have another level of his game to unlock? It's hard to think, but we haven't seen him next to a guy like Christian Wilkins, and that pairing is just really exciting. Then, of course, the emergence of Malcolm Koonce opposite, and then we'll see what Tyree Wilson can deliver. I mean, I think anybody can watch him at Texas Tech and realize that it's a tools player, right? And it hasn't all come together, but the tools are really special. And that was the same with like a guy like Trayvon Walker, who took a big step year 1 to year 2, not to mention that Tyree Wilson had some injuries that he was battling as a rookie on a defensive line that quite honestly didn't have enough around him. So I think there's a lot of upside with this defensive line, including elevated play from a guy like Maxx Crosby.
Yeah. And I think the whole picture defensively getting better is another way for Crosby to tap into whatever next level of production. I don't think the play has that much further out to go. Right. But the production, I mean, the Raiders defensively, since he got drafted in 2019, I think it's like 3 seasons that are like 28th or worse in like pass defense. They had a year where they had like 6 interceptions. So just the complementary group, this is the best it's been between adding Christian Wilkins, the development of Malcolm Koonce, Tyree Wilson coming into year 2, you're optimistic for what that can look like. And then even getting behind that with Spillane, who was such a great free agent hit for them in free agency last year. Divine Deablo is a safety convert who is a rangy linebacker, and it does work for them. They pick up Jack Jones off waivers. The concern with Jack Jones is some of the intangible type stuff, but on the field, there's no question how physically talented he is, and he has the potential to be a CB1 here. And then they have a young safety in Tre'Von Moehrig who had his best season last year. So there's a lot of stuff for Patrick Graham's defense that feels like it's starting to click into place. And that's got to be a really exciting thing for Raiders fans.
I think CB2 is the big one, right? Like, I feel good about Hobbs in the slot, Jack Jones on the outside. Can Jacorian Bennett take a major step in year 2? Can DeCameron Richardson start as a rookie? Like, I think that's probably your biggest question. Because, like, to your point, the linebackers have come together. Spillane, like, I remember watching him early in the season, and I was asking some Steelers people. I was like, "Yo, what's up here?" Like, I don't remember this. And he's elevated himself, and Deablo has worked out as a transition. So CB2, I think, is that big question mark for me on the defense. In addition to, do we have enough at defensive tackle outside of Christian Wilkins, right? And I think those are your big storylines for this Raiders defense.
Yeah, but fairly sturdy up the middle in the back 7. You know, guys that we have at least graded as adequate starters include Hobbs and Spillane and Deablo and Epps and then Moehrig. Like,
it's good.
The spine of it's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And then you got a couple elite players up front on the defensive line. So I think it's fair to invoke the question of the depth. It's funny seeing the 3 of the top 4 guys are former Dolphins.
Yeah.
Jenkins was there in 21, and Adam Butler was there, I think, in 21 21, and now obviously Christian Wilkins. So a lot of familiarity with that group, and those guys can still go, but Jenkins and Butler specifically foiled against one another are very specific types of role players, and they'll just have to make sure that they're rotating. And I do think Tyree Wilson's ability to play inside will help alleviate some of that as well, because you're going to want him on the field in some passing downs and situations.
It is my duty to point out that this is probably the best kicker punter tandem.
It is. Yep. I am not going to argue with you one bit.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a better one out there. Some good ones. But if you can have any pair for your team, I think you're picking Daniel Carlson and AJ Cole. It's just and that you're talking about the margins, right? Like, I don't know. People think special teams are in the margin. I think it's right there. Like, if you can't see the impact of special teams, you're not watching football. But those guys are outstanding. And for a team that I still think is going to want to run the ball, play some defense, I think special teams is going to be a big part of that equation. And you couldn't ask for a better pair of specialists.
Keep talking for just a minute.
Okay. I love when Kyle does this. I've completed a thought. I handed the baton.
I have a
Kyle.
thought, but I don't want. We like to speak from a place of education on this podcast.
So if
I don't want to
talk about filibustering, I mean, it's
okay. Yeah,
all right. There it is.
They're 5th in the league in cap space. They've got $34 million in cap space. What would the conversation be like for the Raiders for you if they signed Kirk Cousins?
Oh, I think it's a playoff team.
And they could still be a playoff team, right? But like the chasm between Kirk and Gardner's large, for us. So I guess that's maybe a bit of a Debbie Downer thought to end the show.
How about this? You've got cap space. Go sign Stephon Gilmore, right, to go be the other corner. Is there any defensive tackles out there we can get?
Lawrence Guy is out there.
I feel like, why do I keep on hearing that he's going to retire? But that'd be like a perfect sign Lawrence Guy.
Is there anybody else in free agency at defensive tackle that's still out there that's exciting?
I hope so, because we've now opened this can of worms. So.
Brian Moan, no, it's not going to help you. Linval Joseph, not going to help you.
No, he's not going to help you.
So yeah, go sign if Lawrence Guy is willing to play,
right?
Go sign Lawrence Guy. But I guess the point that I would like to make, and you kind of already alluded to it, this team feels like it's close to something, right? And the fact that you have the salary cap space that you have now, you have some big contracts for next year, but you're in a fairly healthy position as far as what your spending is going to look like long term. The cap is accelerating at a very high rate. Pretty fascinating team with what they did at the end of the year last year and what their football operations decisions look like and what the nucleus of this team looks like. I think Raiders fans have a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll see what those question marks at CB2 and quarterback provide. for them, especially in a competitive AFC landscape. But that is going to do it for us here today on this episode of Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's Joe Marino. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here.